The Tylenol killer was a ghost. No demands for money, no political manifesto, no personal vendetta against the victims. Someone simply walked into Chicago area drugstores, bought bottles of Tylenol, laced the capsules with deadly cyanide, and returned them to the shelves. 7 innocent people died from this anonymous act of terrorism. The FBI launched one of the largest investigations in Bureau history, but the killer left almost no trace. 42 years later, investigators still don't know who committed America's most terrifying act of product tampering or why. September 29, 1982. Dr. Edmund Donahue had seen thousands of autopsies during his career as Cook County Medical Examiner, but nothing had prepared him for what he discovered that morning. For bodies lay on examination tables, all victims of apparent heart attacks, all young, all healthy, all dead within hours of each other. But something felt wrong. Donahue's trained eye caught details that didn't fit. The cherry red coloring of their blood, the bitter almond scent that clung to their remains. These weren't heart attacks. These were poisonings. Cyanide poisonings. When lab results confirmed his suspicions, Donahue felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morgue's temperature. For people had been murdered with one of the most lethal substances known to science. But who had killed them, and why? The answer came from an unexpected source. Helen Jensen, a nurse in Arlington Heights, was reviewing the details of Adam Janis's death when she noticed something peculiar. The family mentioned that Adam had taken Tylenol before collapsing. So had his brother Stanley and sister-in-law Teresa, who died hours later at the family gathering. Jensen's pulse quickened as she made the connection. She called Dr. Donahue immediately. "Doctor, I think I know how they were poisoned." They all took Tylenol. Within hours, investigators had confirmed Jensen's theory. Every victim had consumed extra-strength Tylenol capsules shortly before death. But when they tested the remaining capsules from the victims' bottles, they found something that defied belief. Each capsule contained enough cyanide to kill multiple people. Someone had carefully opened the gelatin capsules, removed the acetaminophen powder, and replaced it with pure death. Then they had reassembled the capsules so perfectly that no one could tell they'd been tampered with. FBI agent Roy Lane stared at the evidence spread across his desk. In 20 years of law enforcement, he'd never encountered anything like this. The killer hadn't targeted specific individuals. They'd simply poisoned random bottles and returned them to store shelves, knowing that innocent people would die. "We're dealing with someone who kills for the pleasure of killing," Lane told his team. "They don't want recognition. They don't want money. They want to watch the world burn." The FBI's Chicago field office became a war room. Maps covered the walls, marked with red pins showing where each poison bottle had been purchased. Agents interviewed thousands of witnesses, reviewed hours of surveillance footage, and pursued every lead, no matter how remote. But the killer had been methodical. They'd purchased bottles from different stores on different days, always paying cash, never caught on security cameras. They'd tampered with the bottles in private, then returned them during busy periods when store clerks wouldn't notice a customer placing items back on shelves. Agent Lane found himself obsessing over the case. He would lie awake at night, trying to understand the mind behind these murders. What kind of person could poison innocent strangers without remorse? What drove someone to commit anonymous murder? The investigation expanded beyond anything the Bureau had ever undertaken. They analyzed every bottle of Tylenol sold in the Chicago area. They interviewed every Johnson & Johnson employee. They pursued hundreds of suspects, from disgruntled pharmaceutical workers to random letter writers claiming responsibility. James Lewis emerged as the most promising lead. The New York man had sent a letter to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million to stop the killings. But as investigators dug deeper, they realized Lewis was likely just an opportunist trying to profit from the tragedy. He was convicted of extortion and sentenced to prison, but Lane knew they hadn't caught the real killer. The ghost remained free. Meanwhile, the murders had triggered a national crisis. Johnson & Johnson recalled 31 million bottles of Tylenol at a cost of over $100 million. Emergency rooms flooded with panicked patients convinced they'd been poisoned. Store shelves emptied as consumers abandoned over-the-counter medications entirely. Chicago police detective Jimmy Gildea watched his city transform into a war zone of fear. Parents refused to give their children any medication. Pharmacists wore gloves when handling bottles. Every sniffle, every headache, every minor pain became a potential death sentence in the public mind. The killer didn't just murder 7 people, Gildea observed. They murdered our sense of safety. They made us afraid of something as basic as taking an aspirin. As weeks turned to months, the investigation began to stall. The FBI had interviewed over 1,000 suspects, analyzed tens of thousands of pieces of evidence, and followed up on countless tips from across the nation. But the killer had left no meaningful trace. Agent Lane studied the case files until his eyes burned. The killer had been intelligent enough to avoid detection cameras, careful enough to leave no fingerprints, and disciplined enough to never brag about their crimes. They'd committed mass murder and simply vanished back into society. By 1983, the task force was scaled down. By 1985, the case was officially transferred to cold case status. By 1990, many investigators privately believed the killer was either dead or had left the country. But Lane refused to give up. Even after retiring from the FBI, he continued working the case as a consultant. He analyzed new DNA techniques, pursued genealogy leads, and interviewed aging suspects. In 2007, he helped establish a new task force that included advanced forensic methods unavailable in 1982. The results were the same. The killer remained a ghost. Dr. Donahue, now retired, sometimes wondered if they'd ever really understand what happened in 1982. We know how the murders were committed, he reflected. We know when they happened and where. But we never learned who did it or why. In 42 years of forensic medicine, it's the only case that still haunts me. The impact of the murders extended far beyond the 7 victims. Congress passed the Federal Anti-Tampering Act in 1983, making product tampering a federal crime punishable by death. The FDA mandated tamper-evident packaging for all over-the-counter medications. Johnson & Johnson pioneered triple-seal bottles that became the industry standard. But perhaps the most lasting change was psychological. The Tylenol murders shattered America's faith in consumer safety. Before 1982, people trusted that products on store shelves were safe. After the murders, that trust was gone forever. Today, every bottle of pills you open, every seal you break, every tamper-evident package you encounter exists because of 7 murders committed by someone whose identity remains unknown. The killer achieved something unprecedented in criminal history. They changed American society without ever being caught. In 2020, Netflix produced a documentary series about the Tylenol murders, introducing the case to a new generation. Viewers were fascinated by the mystery, but also disturbed by its implications. In an age of terrorism and random violence, the idea of an anonymous killer striking without warning feels more relevant than ever. The FBI officially suspended active investigation of the case in 2010, though they maintain that it remains open. If the killer is still alive, they would be in their 60s or 70s today. They might be your neighbor, your coworker, your grandfather. They might watch the documentaries about their crimes with secret satisfaction, knowing they committed the perfect murder. 7 families lost loved ones to an act of incomprehensible evil. A nation lost its innocence about consumer safety. And somewhere, a killer got away with it all. The ghost who terrorized America in 1982 was never caught, never identified, never brought to justice. They remain free, having achieved what no criminal in American history had managed before: anonymous mass murder with 0 consequences. The Tylenol murders remind us that evil sometimes wins, that justice isn't always served, and that some ghosts are never laid to rest. 42 years later, the killer's greatest victory isn't the 7 lives they took. It's the fear they instilled in millions of people who still hesitate, if only for a moment, before taking a simple over-the-counter pain reliever. If you found this video interesting, make sure to subscribe for more cold cases where the truth remains hidden in the shadows.